Did my running form lead to my stress fracture? Runners are often concerned about their form. I get inquiries all the time about a runner that wants me to watch them run to see if they have any inefficiencies or if the way that they run is leading to some poor performances or some injuries. Running form is a complex topic. It can be confusing and overwhelming, and I wanted to dive into one specific thing today and how it relates to bone stress injuries. While running form can be a component of an injury, there's often a lot more things that we need to look into, specifically when we get into bone stress injuries. There was a paper that was published a few weeks back that looked at if step rate, cadence, which is one component of running form, is a component of why someone might develop a bone stress injury. Now, we need a lot of research when it comes to managing and preventing bone stress injuries. We're not very good at dealing with these, and we're certainly not very good at preventing them. So this kind of research is absolutely warranted. Now, they had these runners run at a moderate intensity pace and took a bunch of data from them. So they have a fancy treadmill and a bunch of imaging software, and then they tracked them for a while. Now, when the study was done, what they found out was that the runners that had a lower step rate had a higher risk of developing a bone stress injury. Again, an important study, but I think a little worrisome when it comes to how we take that information and put that into real people. So let's examine what step rate is and what might be going into why certain runners move in different ways. Now, the first thing that we need to understand with step rate is that it's not a static number. Just because you run at 170 steps per minute when you look down at your watch doesn't necessarily mean that that's your step rate always. Step rate is going to be affected by how fast or slow we run, if we're tired, if we're navigating different terrain, if I'm running on a road versus running on a single track, and throughout the course of my life, it's probably going to change. We see that when we analyze high school runners, as they run more often through high school, their step rate actually increases. We see that collegiate runners tend to have a higher step rate than high school runners. So it's not a static number, it's not what we do always, and it's probably not what we're always going to be. Our step rate's probably going to change throughout our life. The second thing I think is important with step rate is that a lot of it is defined by our anatomy. I actually did a blog post on this a couple years ago where I looked at two of my clients that run at similar paces but are very different heights. What we find is that runners that have longer bones tend to have lower step rates, and runners that have shorter bones tend to have higher step rates. There's certainly an anatomy component to this where however you're set up is going to have an influence on your step rate, and that's probably not going to be something we need to necessarily change. Changing our step rate can be very helpful. Elizabeth Boyer and colleagues at Iowa State have found that if we increase our step rate by 5 to 10%, it can be really helpful in decreasing some strain on our knee and other structures that we might be dealing with pain. So if a runner is dealing with knee pain and they have a really low step rate, a simple solution for them can be to increase their step rate by 5 to 10%. It's a way for us to shift forces around. Why are we talking about this in the context of bone stress injuries? If we go back to other videos that I've done, one of the key components of bones is that they're always changing. And our bones are affected by everything that we do. One of the components is stress. There was a really great study by Whippert in 2017 that looked exactly into this and how there's a plausible relationship between being in a highly stressful situation and that having a negative impact on our skeleton. The stresses that we're under, our nutrition, and other health issues that we might have probably play a bigger role into our development of a bone stress injury than how much mileage we run, how fast we run, and what our individual mechanics are. It's not that they both can't be a component of these injuries, it's that we really need to investigate those other things first before we get into any specifics with how someone runs. Let's go back to that study. That was done on college athletes. Here are some of the things I think we need to investigate with a college runner before we get to how they run. If an athlete consults me, I want to know how they're doing at developing new friendships. How is the relationship with their roommates? How's the relationship with their new coach? How are they doing with the fact that they're probably not the fastest runner on the team anymore? How are they adjusting to their academic stress load? And how are they adjusting to the fact that they're generally on their own for the first time now? Investigating those areas is not a one-time thing. It's a continual relationship in developing trust with the athlete. And these are conversations I think need to happen between healthcare providers and college athletes, between coaching staffs and college athletes, and anybody else that's involved in that person's care. It takes time, it takes effort, and it's a lot harder to measure than how someone runs, how strong they are, or what they look like through an objective assessment. We're often stressed for time and resources in the collegiate environment. If we have time and resources to invest in investigating something, I think we need to do a better job of investigating the overall well-being of our athletes as opposed to specific mechanics and things that I think are a little bit more minute in nature. And this goes to the bigger idea of the fact that bone stress injuries to me are ecosystem injuries, not training load injuries. Often we think about them as you ran too much too fast. Training can certainly be a component of them, but it's the overall ecosystem that person is in and how that's going that I think plays a much bigger role in their injury than the things that we often associate it with. A practical takeaway from this. There's a great resource that was developed by Emily Krause and colleagues called the Modified Female Athlete Triad Risk Assessment. It's a lot of words. It's this thing right here. It investigates different areas that go into a bone stress injury, and it gives us a way of assessing some risk with the development of one of these. This has been studied in males and females and has seemed to be pretty important. I would have everybody fill one of these out, and I would be investigating these areas continuously over time. The second thing I would do, go for a walk with your athlete. Get to know them. See how they're doing. Develop that relationship and develop that trust. There's a lot of great college coaches. There's a lot of great healthcare providers in college. There's also some not so great ones. I wanted to share a quick story. I had an old client that trained with me when she was in high school. Really successful high school career, injury-free, everything was great. Moved on to a big school and ran into a rough patch of injuries. She ended up dealing with 2 high-risk bone stress injuries during her first couple years of college. Now, over time, she was able to come back from those and eventually had a really successful second half of college. Do you want to know what her coach said to her? Her body had to harden itself to the demands of collegiate running. Seriously? Now, not all coaches send these messages, but a lot do. Healthcare providers do too. We got to continue to do a better job about getting that messaging out of the system. Whether you're at a big school, a small school, your goal is to run and have fun or compete at the highest level, we need to do a better job about the messaging that we send because, again, if we go to the stress idea, how stressful of an environment is that? If that's the messaging that's being sent, I don't really care what your running form is. It's not to say running form doesn't matter, but there's a whole lot more that we need to investigate before we go to that as the component of the injury. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you found this helpful. Make sure to like, subscribe, and comment below, and have a great rest of your day.